Welcome back to the AI Lancet, your one-stop shop for breaking down the latest medical research.
I'm Agatha.
And I'm Stanley.
We're going to be looking at the February 17th issue of the Lancet today.
That's issue number 10427, for those of you keeping score at home.
And don't worry, we know medical research can be, well, a little dense sometimes.
But we promise we'll make it clear and easy to understand, even if you don't have a medical degree.
You can find links to the full articles in the show notes if you want to dive deeper.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about living donor liver transplants. It's a procedure that's really come a long way. I mean, can you believe it's saved over 80,000 lives since 2000?
It really is incredible.
And, you know, the whole thing started back in 1963 with that very first liver transplant by a surgeon named Thomas E. Starzl.
Yeah.
But, of course, early on there were a lot of challenges, especially when it came to size mismatch.
Right.
Like, you can't just take a liver from an adult and put it into a child, right?
Right. They had to figure out how to make the donor liver fit.
Exactly. And that's where these incredible surgeons really, I guess, had to get creative.
So in 1984, Bismuth and Hussein developed a technique called graft reduction.
Which basically means shrinking the donor liver, right?
Yep, to make it fit better.
Amazing. And then in 1988, Beil-Shamir and his team figured out how to split a single donor liver and transplant it into two people.
Talk about making the most of a precious resource.
Right. But the real game changer came in 1989 with the first living donor liver transplant.
Yeah, that was by Raya and colleagues. And it was specifically for children, too.
Imagine that someone donating part of their liver while they're still alive.
I mean, it definitely raised some ethical eyebrows at the time.
Of course. I mean, it's a much bigger deal than, say, donating a kidney. But over time, it became more accepted, especially in places where using organs from deceased donors just wasn't, well, an option for cultural or religious reasons.
Right. Medicine is definitely shaped by more than just science. And it keeps evolving, too. I mean, we've gone from open surgery to laparoscopic techniques.
Which are much less invasive, right?
Exactly. And now they're even starting to use robotic surgery for these transplants. It's incredible.
Okay, so let's switch gears now and talk about preeclampsia. It's a condition that affects about 2.8% of pregnant women and can be really dangerous for both mom and baby.
Yeah, but what's even more common is suspected preeclampsia, which affects almost 10% of pregnancies.
Wow. That's a lot of anxious moms to be.
And it puts a huge strain on maternity care, too, because you need a way to figure out who really needs intervention.
That's where this test called placental growth factor comes in, right? PLGF.
Exactly. It's a simple blood test that can help determine the likelihood of preeclampsia.
So the question is, how often do you need to do this test? I mean, is more always better?
Well, not necessarily. There was a big study in the UK called the PARA-2 trial.
Led by Alice Hurrell and her team.
Yeah. They wanted to see if doing repeat PLGF tests actually made a difference in outcomes for moms and babies.
And what did they find?
Well, the initial PLGF test was definitely helpful, but get this. Routine repeat testing didn't improve outcomes for babies.
Interesting.
It actually led to more preterm births before 34 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And more cesarean sections. It seems that repeat testing might have led to interventions that just weren't necessary.
So sometimes more testing isn't always better.
Right.
All right, let's move on to a different topic. This one's about Pakistan.
Oh, the economic crisis.
Yeah.
It's having a huge impact on cancer care.
It's just a really tough situation all around. I mean, declining economy, inflation through the roof, the recent floods, it's all put a massive strain on their healthcare system.
And when resources are tight, cancer care often takes a hit.
Yeah. Just to give you an idea, Pakistan is facing a severe shortage of cancer treatment centers. They also don't have enough essential medicines, and many of those have to be imported.
And with the import restrictions, there's this black market that's sprung up.
Which is obviously incredibly dangerous.
The World Health Organization estimates over 118,000 people in Pakistan die from cancer every year, and another 173,000 new cases are diagnosed annually.
It's just heartbreaking.
There's also a shortage of trained oncologists and nurses.
Wow. You know, it really highlights how economic problems can directly impact healthcare.
Definitely.
But despite all that, there are institutions doing incredible work in Pakistan. The Shaukat Khanum Memorial Cancer Hospital, for example.
They rely heavily on fundraising to provide free or subsidized treatment
to patients from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, regardless of whether they can pay.
It really shows their dedication.
It does. But they can't do it alone. Pakistan really needs international support. Money, medicine, and collaboration with organizations around the world. This is a situation that deserves global attention.
I agree.
Okay, let's move on to something that might sound a little complex, but stick with us. It's fascinating. It's called hidradenitis suppurativa.
It's a chronic skin condition.
Yeah. It causes these really painful boils and abscesses. Imagine having to deal with recurring painful bumps in places like your armpits or groin.
It can have huge impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. So there are these two big trials, Sunshine and Sunrise.
Led by Alexa B. Kimball.
Right. They were testing a new drug called secukinumab for this condition.
Secukinumab targets a specific inflammatory molecule called IL-17A. Basically, it blocks this molecule that tells cells to get inflamed.
Gotcha. So did the drug work?
Well, the trials did show that secukinumab helped, but the effect was, I guess you could say, modest.
So why wasn't it working as well as they'd hoped?
Well, a critique by Mall and his colleagues suggested that the scoring system they were using in the trials, called HiSCR, might not be capturing the whole picture.
How so?
HiSCR focuses mainly on abscesses and nodules, but it doesn't really account for these draining tunnels.
Draining tunnels.
Yeah, they're another hallmark of this condition, and they can be incredibly painful.
Oh, I see. So maybe they're underestimating the benefits of the drug because the way they're measuring it isn't comprehensive enough.
Exactly.
It's like saying a tree is healthy just because its leaves look good, but you haven't even checked the roots.
Right.
All right, let's switch gears again and head over to Nepal. We're going to talk about the challenges of caring for, what are they called?
Small, vulnerable newborns.
Right, small vulnerable newborns, or SVNs. Basically, babies who are premature, have low birth weight, or have other health complications.
They need very specialized care.
But a series in the Lancet pointed out a big problem: inconsistent data.
It makes it hard to give these babies the care they need.
So in Nepal, for example, they don't have a good system for tracking how these babies are doing.
Right, which makes it hard to understand the scale of the problem.
And to allocate resources effectively.
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
And on top of that, Nepal's healthcare system is already facing challenges.
Yeah.
You've got government hospitals, mission hospitals, private hospitals.
And the geography makes it really hard to reach everyone.
Right. But there's this other weird trend, too. The Kathmandu Valley, which has the most healthcare workers, actually has lower neonatal mortality rates than more remote areas.
Yeah, that's the inverse care law. The people who need the most care often have the least access to it.
It's really frustrating.
So D'Souza and colleagues suggest a simple solution.
Which is?
Incorporate SVN categories into their national data reporting.
Make the invisible visible, so to speak.
Exactly.
Because if you don't know how many babies are struggling, how can you help them?
Exactly.
Speaking of data, let's talk stats.
Oh boy, everyone's favorite topic.
I know. But it's important. It's the language of science, and if you want to understand medical research, you've got to understand at least the basics.
Well, thankfully, Mansurnia and Nizamipur have given us a guide.
Oh, good.
Yeah, to help us spot those common statistical pitfalls in medical research.
So what are some red flags we should be looking out for?
Well, first of all, pay attention to the data descriptions.
What do you mean?
It's not enough to just look at the averages. You need to see the whole distribution of the data. Imagine you're trying to choose a restaurant online. You wouldn't just want to see the average rating, right? You want to see how many people gave it 1 star, 2 stars, and so on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It gives you a better picture. The same goes for medical research. Seeing the full range of data is really important.
Okay, what else?
Also, look out for, for whether researchers are being clear about their model assumptions. Those are the conditions that the statistical analysis is based on. It's like building a house, you need to make sure the foundation is solid before you start adding the roof.
Okay, good analogy.
What else? Another thing, don't get too caught up in p-values.
P-values.
Yeah, you know, that magical number that tells us if a result is statistically significant.
Right.
They only tell us whether a result is likely due to chance.
Oh, so they don't tell us if the result is actually important, clinically relevant.
Exactly. It's like finding a tiny speck of gold in a giant pile of dirt. Sure, it's gold, but is it worth the effort to dig it out?
Okay, good point.
We also need to pay attention to how missing data is dealt with, which happens a lot in research, and how they handle it can really change the findings. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle with some pieces missing. You can make guesses, but you might end up with a completely different picture.
Right.
And finally, watch out for sparse data bias.
Sparse data bias.
It's basically when there's not enough data to support the conclusions, especially when it comes to ratios or proportions. It's like trying to build a tower out of playing cards. It might look impressive, but it could all come crashing down pretty easily.
So the bottom line is statistics is important, but we've got to be critical thinkers, right? Not just take things at face value.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to Richard Horton's editorial.
Oh, the one about the internet.
Yeah, offline. The internet, a line has been crossed. It's pretty thought-provoking. He basically argues that the internet, which was supposed to connect us all, has become, well, kind of toxic.
He calls it a mortally polluted ocean of toxicity.
Yeah, his words, not mine. He uses some pretty powerful examples, too, like the cases of Brianna Gay and Molly Russell.
Both teenagers who tragically lost their lives.
Yeah. Brianna Gay was a transgender girl who was murdered, and her killers had accessed violent content online.
And Molly Russell had been struggling with depression and took her own life after being exposed to a lot of disturbing content online.
It's a stark reminder of the dark side of the internet, especially for young people.
He argues these cases are just the beginning, though.
Yeah. He really paints a bleak picture, doesn't he? Addiction, loneliness, cruelty, psychosis, you name it.
He argues it's amplifying the worst parts of humanity.
It's easy to dismiss this as another old man yells at cloud rant, but I think he's raising some really important points. We need to be having this conversation about the impact of technology, especially on mental health.
I agree.
And, he's not saying we should abandon the internet completely.
He's just asking us to be more mindful about our online lives.
Right.
To reclaim our offline lives.
Strengthen our communities.
And protect children.
Okay, so now let's hear a different perspective.
From Adrovo's piece.
Yeah. Successful local science in low-income and middle-income countries. He's basically saying researchers in these countries are often at a disadvantage.
They might not have the funding, the technology, or the infrastructure.
But their work is just as important.
And they're coming up with some really innovative solutions.
Solutions that are tailored to their community's specific needs. Right.
Yeah.
And I love this analogy he uses. They'd rather be the mouse head than the lion tail.
Meaning?
Meaning they'd rather lead research in their own context, even if it's smaller scale, than just be a tiny part of a massive project directed from somewhere else.
Oh, I get it. Taking ownership.
Exactly. And you know what? This actually ties in really well with our next article, which is about China.
China's philosophy for a healthier population, harmony with diversity.
That's the one. It's amazing what they've achieved in public health. Their philosophy is based on Confucianism and traditional Chinese medicine.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's this idea of harmony with diversity, this holistic view, recognizing that everything's interconnected.
So what have they done specifically?
Well, they've tackled big public health problems like malaria and schistosomiasis, and they've managed to get basic health insurance for their entire population.
Wow.
Which is huge, considering they have over 1.4 billion people.
It really shows what's possible with strong political will and a real commitment to public health.
They've really put this philosophy into practice.
So how do they manage it?
Well, they combine traditional approaches with modern medicine.
Makes sense.
Focused on prevention and early intervention.
Smart.
And they've invested heavily in healthcare infrastructure, especially in rural areas.
It's not just about treating people when they're sick.
Right. It's about building a system that promotes health and well-being for everyone.
I like that.
Me too. It's a great model for other countries to learn from.
Okay, so let's go back to academia for a minute. We were talking about the Race Equality Charter before.
Oh, right.
It's supposed to address racism and inequality at universities in the UK.
Right.
But Obasi raises some concerns about whether it's actually working. She argues that it might not be going far enough to help Black academics and staff.
I see.
She's worried that the recent update to the REC, which made the application process easier and more flexible, could actually weaken its impact.
Look, interesting.
And then she compares it to the Athena Swan Charter, which is for gender equality.
Oh, okay.
She points out that the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine got a Silver Athena Swan Award despite never having promoted a Black female researcher.
Oh, wow.
So it raises this question about whether these awards really mean anything. Are they just a way for institutions to get a pat on the back without actually changing things?
Right. It's like saying, look how great we are at promoting diversity, but then nothing actually changes.
Yeah, we need to make sure these awards are actually leading to real, tangible progress.
All right, let's wrap things up with Dr. Susan Abarca Salazar.
What a remarkable person.
It's truly sad that she passed away at such a young age. She was just 36.
And she accomplished so much in her life.
She started her medical journey in Peru, specialized in infectious and tropical diseases, worked in hospitals in Lima, setting up infection prevention and control programs.
She was also really passionate about research.
Yeah, she got a master's at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and was working on a PhD with Nagasaki University.
She was a real go-getter. And she always put her patients first, too.
Like when she volunteered during the COVID-19 pandemic. She just really wanted to help people.
Her colleagues say she was brilliant and compassionate, and she had a real knack for connecting with her patients.
Dr. Abarca Salazar's legacy is a powerful reminder that medicine is about more than just treating diseases. It's about improving lives, leaving the world a better place than we found it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into this issue of The Lancet. We've explored some groundbreaking research, discussed some challenging ethical questions, and even delved into the world of statistics. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
We encourage you to check out the full articles if you want to learn more.
And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and tell us what resonated with you or if you have any questions.
Until next time, stay curious.
Keep learning.